Hi, folks. With Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for listening. In this essay, I'd like to talk about really this is a phenomenon I noticed a while ago, but it seems to be getting more prevalent. That is, people getting in trouble with the police, and the police body cams are recording this, where a simple stoppage for say, I don't know, a tail light that's out, or not indicating properly to make a turn, or something really basic, traffic violation, and the people get pulled over, and they probably get off with a caution if they were polite and agreeable to the officer, and yes, I won't do it again, sir, and all this sort of stuff. But instead it turns into a drama, and sometimes the drama goes just off the scales, off the charts. And there are these videos recording it. So I'm thinking of one now where a woman hadn't properly parked, a young woman, she'd be like 19, 20 or something like that. She hadn't properly parked her vehicle, and an officer was going by and stopped. Hey, you haven't parked this properly. And then the woman starts giving a lip, and you've got no right to stop me. You've got no right to. And well, hold on, it's an officer of the law. They've got every right. And now the officer wasn't. I'm not sure if I was a police officer, I would have stopped somebody for that. But nonetheless, the officer has stopped them, and really, clearly the officer just wants to give a caution and then go about their day. But the woman decides to turn it into a drama. And then, so I need to see your ID and your registration. And then the woman refuses. Then she locks the car door, and then the glass has to be broken. She has to be dragged out. She's screaming, kicking, and punching the officer. And then next thing you know, it's become a serious offence, and she's facing serious charges, assaulting an officer of the law and obstructing justice, all that sort of stuff, and then is in court. Now, for something that should never have come to that. Now, what's noticeable in these and others that I've looked at is that in every case, it's certainly the ones I've seen anyway, it's a minority person who's interacting with the law or with officialdom. It could be somebody trying to go through board an aircraft, so they're dealing with like the check-in employees and so on. So, but the same thing comes up each time. The young woman, this is a white woman, you've got no right to stop me or do anything. This is misogyny. This is patriarchy. This is oppression. I don't have to do what you say because you're an oppressor. You are morally wrong, and I am morally right because I am the oppressed victim. Therefore, I don't have to do. Your rules don't apply. Your laws are not legitimate. I am an oppressed woman. You can't tell me what to do. Your law's not legitimate. I don't have to do what you tell me, and so on. Now, this is an interesting sort of thing, and it's become, I think, a phenomenon. And then when you look at the black guy, he wants to board the plane, but he's drunk and he's becomes violent, makes threats, and so on. So the staff's, hey, you're not going to board the plane. That's it. You're a racist. You're a fascist. Slavery. Slavery. I'm still a slave, but your white people's laws don't apply to me. I can get on that plane if I want to. You can't stop me. Then the police arrive. The police then are accused of being racist, spat on. He's fighting and punching them. He's in cuff now. The guy's got serious charges. When in reality, all he had to do is not attempt to board the plane drunk and violent and making threats. That's all he needed to do. So it's very easy to conform with the laws and the policies of the aircraft company and so on. And it's hardly, nothing's going to be accomplished by engaging in a violent scuffle. Nothing's going to be accomplished. You're still not going to get what you want, and it's likely that you'll face charges and or you may be banned from the airline or something like that. So again, nothing can be achieved. But in every case, even if it's people picked up for shoplifting, and in some cases, two young black women have got over $1,000 of stuff they've they stuffed in their bags and that sort of thing, and they get caught for this. That they try and deny, I ain't done nothing. Why are you stopping me? I ain't done nothing. I ain't done nothing. Why are you stopping? And they go down that path, but it then flips almost straight away to, hey, it's only illegal to shoplift because of white man's laws. I'm a slave and you're the slave. I'm a victim of slavery. So you can't do. I'm only compensating myself for the slavery hundreds of years ago, and this entire dialogue that's permeated the entire Western world since the mass migration, particularly since the mass migration was forced on the West, but even going back earlier than that, the gender wars and so on. Each time it's asserted by the globalist goons and the people they fund, the NGOs and so on, that they're determined to create a level of social dysfunction and a breakdown in law and order, a breakdown in the democratic process, a breakdown in norms, a breakdown in the ability to apply laws equally and so on. There has to be special carve-outs for so-called victim groups, whether that's carve-outs in affirmative action and DEI or carve-outs in two-tier legal systems and justice, activist judges, activist prosecutors, and so on. This has become, and very much obviously so, has become a way of disintegrating Western society. Now, hitherto, we all pretty much agreed, not that we maybe liked it, we all pretty much agreed that independent courts, independent and objective police and courts and judges and prosecutors, that's a good thing. And it's equal application of the law, equal before the law, equality and justice for all, this sort of thing. Did it work 100% perfect 100% of the time? Of course not. But it's about as close as it ever got to that. And the idea that an independent judge, an independent prosecutor and jury and all this sort of thing, I think that's the likelihood then, when nobody knows anybody else or cares about their race or cares about whether they're men or women, or when nothing else matters other than the facts, the likelihood is you're going to get a just outcome. Is it, again, perfect all the time? No. But the likelihood is, on balance of probability, you're far more likely to get an outcome that's based on the law and based on facts than anything else. Whereas once you go again in the weeds of race this and gender that and LGBTQ, you get into all that, then the objectivity of the law and the application of the treatment of facts just goes out the window. So there's a lot of people out there, a lot now, and this is borne out by these videos, to think, well, the laws aren't legitimate. I've been to high school. They told me there the laws aren't legitimate, slavery and this was reinforced in college when I did my gender studies course, that laws are man's laws, they're white man's laws, they're capitalist laws, and none of these apply to me. I can just opt out. They're not legitimate laws. They're not laws that I have to abide by, which means that they can, as they would see it, have the arbitrary right to pick and choose what laws should and shouldn't apply to them. Now, they already get this sense anyway, because I'm the most dumbass high school student ever existed, but I still got into university. I'm the most dumbass, lazy, useless uni student that ever existed, but I still get a degree. So this all-pervasive attitude, well, really, the rules don't apply to me. I have a special victim status here, and just the laws, the rules, the conventions, they just don't apply to me, because I can just say slavery, black, racist, lesbian, and this becomes a get out of jail free card. Now, I first noticed this, and I'm going back to childhood here, but when amongst the mass migrants, there's a lot of people that are coming in from the third world shitholes and the much less developed societies, organisationally and legally and socially. That these societies, that the concept of independent police, independent courts, independent juries, independent application and objective application of the law, the rules applying equally to everybody, that they have no concept of that. They can't even fathom it at a distance. It's that foreign to them. Even when they're second and third generation Western born, they still can't get their heads around it. Whereas it's what, in the West at least, we think is just how it's done. Why would you want to do it any other way? If you want a fair and just system, that's how you have to do it. But they don't see it that way. And these people from the third world, they've got no conception of it. Now, I saw this as a kid. I mercifully and briefly went to a school with a lot of recent Arabic immigrants had come in from like Lebanon and places like that, Jordan and so on. And I was quite shocked at their attitude to the rules and so on. They just didn't. The authority and justice comes from a religious person, the imam or something. Even a lot of these Lebanese were supposedly Christian, and they come from the tribal elder. They come from the village elder, and they come from the family and so on. That's where authority and laws and what is and isn't acceptable behavior comes from. And they truly just couldn't understand this idea that the teachers at the school, this new country they've come to, the teacher school weren't religious, Islamic this or that. So we don't recognize your authority. Your authority is not legitimate. You can't tell us what to do. So the structures that existed for controlling and legally, if you like, administering the populace had gone. So when they come to a new country, that's not there anymore. So they don't know what to do. What is the acceptable behavior? And it's compounded, made more difficult because they believe the laws and the authority of the people around them, the police, the courts, the teachers at school, the government officials, the authority is not legitimate. Well, I don't have to listen to you. I don't have to do what you say. You have no legitimacy. You can't tell me what to do. Now, unless you're giving them free stuff, then they're compliant. But outside of that, it's no. I get to pick and choose what rules and laws I'll abide by. And this was even evident in kids at junior high school. And this took me very much by surprise back then. And I've mentioned many times the sort of things that these Arabic folks did. Again, I'll mention this, and I've mentioned it before in sports day in change rooms. One of them would drop or more than one, drop a big turd, and they just no problem. They just drop their dacks and drop a big turd in the middle of the change room floor, and then these Arab guys, they'd hang around at either side of the entrance to the change room, and they just grab white kids and try and push them into the turd, and enjoying every minute. This was like great entertainment. Now, I wouldn't have dreamed of doing that, and none of the white kids would do it, and white kids were quite bewildered. Why would you want to do that? Why would you find it entertaining? But they did. Other things they did as well would be to open a kid's school bag, take out his lunch, and then they'd hack. And they all seem to have these odd respiratory problems, but they would hack into the guy's sandwich or into his drink bottle and things like that, and put it back in the bag. Then they'd stand off a distance and watch for when the kid came back and would eat his sandwich, and then again they would enjoy it. It was a huge entertainment for them. So they had very different views of things. But when they were caught for doing various things, which they often were, stealing from the medical cabinet in the carpentry class, and they just go to the medical cabinet and start taking out stuff in their pockets. And the teacher would stop, and there'd be a punch up with the teacher. It was that bad. And then and the police were around every day at this school, and it was and there was one Arab kid who'd apparently he hadn't behaved as he was supposed to, so a bunch of them, this was in summer, this was a hot day, a bunch of them took him, went somewhere out at the back, and one of them had the magnifying glass. Well, they tortured this kid. I'm talking 11-year-old kids, by the way. They tortured this kid with the magnifying glass and burning on his his leg and his arm and whatever, and the police were called over that, and it was diabolical. But I remember talking to some of these kids, and remember I don't know, 11 years old or something. I remember talking to these kids or some of them, and why do you do this? Because you're frequently getting caught, and you're getting punished and caned, and all sorts of things. Police are coming around. You're constantly in trouble, and your parents are being called to the school, and do you need that aggravation? Why would you invite that sort of thing? But their view was that the rules No, I don't have to follow the rules. I don't have to follow the laws. They're not legitimate. They're not legitimate. They don't apply to me. And what I have to do is be more cunning, more, I have to employ more low cunning into avoiding being caught. So their reading of this, again, we're talking 11-year-old kids here, their reading of this was, I just have to be better at not getting caught. I don't have to stop what I'm doing. I don't have to stop breaking the rules and breaking the law. I don't have to do that. No, I can do it if I want, because the laws and the rules aren't legitimate. So I can continue to break them, as and when I see fit at a whim. I just have to be better at not being caught. And that was their takeaway on this. Their idea that if I behave differently, I won't get in trouble. No. Didn't cross their minds. Now, this is, I would argue, given the mass of people coming in who come from, whether it's third world countries, and particularly Islamic republics, because they believe Christian laws and anything other than Islamic law don't apply to them. So they can again just arbitrarily decide what they will and won't do. Now, as long as you're giving them free stuff, they're compliant. But as soon as that stops, then they're no. My laws are what count. My imam is my imam at the mosque is the one who decides what's right and wrong, not you and your courts and your police and your codified laws and so on. Now, given the amount of people coming in from third world countries that have those views or similar views, even Pacific Islanders around the Pacific, they have small islands, population maybe of 50,000. Everyone's related to everybody, and the authority comes from, again, the village tribal elders and family members, this sort of thing. It doesn't come from laws. It doesn't come from courts. It doesn't come from police. There are other sources of authority, and only those sources are legitimate. So when they come to Australia or a Western country, they view that all the laws and the police and the courts, none of it is legitimate. None of them. They don't have to follow any of it. And if they're going to avoid getting into trouble, they just have to be super clever at avoiding not getting caught. That's all they have to do. And so their energies and attitudes are put into different pursuits than the average white person. Now, why you would invite or want or bring in that many people, all of whom are determined to avoid the law and believe that the laws don't apply to them, then you add into that the decades of indoctrination of minorities of all sorts, who are told, misogynist law, patriarchal law, the racist law, slavery, and so on. And they believe the law doesn't apply to them either. So you have now something, I would argue, something in the region of 75% of the total population in the West, most Western countries, certainly given the what is conceived as a minority these days, racially, gender, and so on, LGBTQ, whatever. But the majority now say, well, the laws don't really apply to me. So the law only applies really, fully to straight white males, then to a lesser extent to straight white females, but to no one else. And so only the most grievous transgressions can involve appropriate punishments for minorities. This is particularly an issue as well, given that many of these woke DAs around the United States and elsewhere around the Western world, by the way, say, well, if provided you're on the woke side of the equation, we won't punish you heavily. If you put out a tweet disagreeing with mass migration, we'll put you in prison. But if you murder a couple of people because you don't like them and you're LGBTQ, then you're a black lesbian, then well, that's kind of okay because you're in a press. So the law's been rejigged so that there are multiple layers of law being applied to people on the basis of their social, imagined, ideologically determined social power. Now, I think this is I think it's a recipe for a complete breakdown of law and order, if we aren't seeing this already, and I think to a large extent we are, and also for the democratic process. Because not only do laws and rules not apply, I didn't like that guy that got elected, so I don't have to, I don't have to support, so I don't have to agree with anything that happens during the time of this guy's administration, or the laws that are passed. Well, that I can just ignore them, or actively oppose them, or undermine them. And if you look at the U.S. public service, where there are vast swathes of people that, well, we don't like Donald Trump, so we'll just do the opposite of whatever he wants, and that's okay. And then you add in factors like, well, we're not really breaking the law. We're not doing anything wrong. We're just fighting Nazis. That's what we're doing. So we're allowed to do that. We're allowed to just arbitrarily rando arrest people that are, just happen to be somewhere in the vicinity of Washington, D.C. on January 6th. And we can do that because we have the power to do it. And well, they may be a Trump supporter, so we're allowed to put them in prison without due legal process and so on. So this is to me a complete disintegration of again, law and order, democracy, and the once almost completely unanimously agreed laws and policies and regulations and so on that used to govern us, that we used to all abide by, that nearly everyone abided by. And that's now broken down, disintegrated, but also splintered. And I don't know how we're going to put that jigsaw back together again. You've been with Tash today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.